Do you want to tell us who you are, tell us about your school a little bit, and then that'll kick us off, and then we'll go from there.
My name's Johnathan Carr. I run the Victorian Fencing Society, which is an organization that does historical fencing, focusing primarily on the 18th and 19th century, although we like to dabble in some earlier periods as well. And I've been involved in fencing for over 40 years, mostly Olympic style. About 15 years ago, I started doing historical fencing. Um,
What brought you to historical fencing?
I've always, even when I did Olympic style fencing, I was always interested in the history of it.
Mhm.
And then I just decided, let's try doing some stuff historically without any real resources at the time. They were there, I just didn't find them yet.
Right.
Uh, and one of the things I like about the 19th century, especially, is there's so many sources
Right.
laid out very well in many different languages. So
Sure.
it was useful.
Was there any, because I did the modern stuff too, was there anything that stood out? Because our community in the history of fencing world, it's almost divisive to say that you
Hmm.
do modern fencing. I don't see why not. Lots of great fundamentals taught in modern fencing. But was there anything that spoke to you that said, you know what, I'm going to pivot. I've done 30 years or 20 years in modern fencing to then make that significant switch.
Well, I still teach modern fencing, so it's just two different things, right? One I love as a sport, the modern fencing. The other I love as sort of an intellectual pursuit. And so my group does not do that many competitions, actually.
Mhm.
And so we're just to plug you a little bit. Your event is one of the ones that we really like, but that's not our focus, I guess.
Right.
And so getting into that sort of study of it rather than going out, how am I going to compete and
Mhm.
training for competition rather than training for, or rather than studying for historical knowledge.
No, that's really cool. And then as far as weapons that you study, is there anything that you would say is a prime focus, or are there some people where it's more generalist, and then why?
Yeah. Well, I think we're a little different than some clubs because our members really like to dabble in things. So if we do have a main focus, it's like traditional 19th century weapons, the classic foil, the dueling sword rather than the epee, the military saber rather than the modern dueling saber. But then we explore all sorts of stuff. We've done tomahawk, we've done bayonet, we actually do a couple of Celtic festivals. So we do
Got it.
sworded barge, the dirk, the Bowie knife. So anything that we can find some resource for. In fact, one of the things we're doing, and we're doing it this summer again, is ancient Roman gladiator. We've gotten some equipment for that. So again, it's just that becomes more experimental archaeology type of thing, but it's interesting to play around with it, see what we can do with it.
Is there any? It's funny. One of our guys showed up one day with a tomahawk, and then we realized how similar when he fought. Because we'll do that too. We're just like it's a free for all. Everyone bring
Yeah,
whatever they want, right? Because it's just
yeah.
fun. And he brought the tomahawks, and then we were like, wait a minute, how similar is this to rapier dagger? So
Hmm.
we were able to use just the things we knew about rapier dagger, and it was effective. It was so cool to see different weapons. Is there like a certain system or a foundation that you guys base everything on, even though you might be moving around to different weapons or?
Not really. I started out with, as a lot of people do, with military saber with Hutton. And while there's seems to be some criticism of him, he's a great starting place. He just lays it out so simply. But not really. We just try to find either period manuals or someone who's done recreations, like the Tomahawk. There's really no manual on that, but a guy named Macklemore who's done several books on those types of weapons. He did the Bowie knife and he did a book on the Tomahawk, and he uses actually historical sources. And you're right. It's like a lot of these people that try to recreate these things go to a lot of Renaissance sources to try and recreate what it might be like fighting with that specific weapon. So there's a connection to all of it.
Oh,
There's only one. There's only so many ways you can hit someone with a bladed weapon.
yeah, for sure. And that's interesting, man, that you're bringing up a weapon from indigenous cultures.
We have an event called the Grand Assault that we do every year, which is based on the 19th century Grand Assault of Arms and stuff like that. And a couple of years ago, we did a Texas Grand Assault of Arms. So we did weapons that connected to different historical parts of Texas. So for the French, we did small sword. For the Spanish, we did the Destreza rapier. And we did, for the indigenous Americans, we did tomahawk. And there were a couple of others that we did as well. But that was kind of cool to
I'll tell you what,
showcase all.
man, I don't think you can have HEMA without indigenous cultures being
Yeah,
represented because they're so part of just the history and the age of exploration and so on
yeah,
that they play such a huge role in people's even motivations to go here or there or it's fascinating. So that's cool, man. That's awesome that you guys do that. And then as far as the tournament, this was something I noticed when I watched you fenced in the first year we did the technical rule set when we did the rapier plus auxiliary. And
right.
what I noticed you did really well in that tournament. I think you might have been a top eight finisher, if I'm not
I think I
mistaken.
got to the semifinals. Really.
It was really good. And what was awesome is like I'm north of 40, even north of 50, right? My question was is, what yes, you had a ton of fencing experience, but you were doing other things in the bout that I found in the bout that I judged that were really it was really interesting to watch you fence. And I was like, what would you say if you were competing in that tournament? What advice would you give to others? What are some things to look out for that might be different than other tournaments? And what just overall, considering that you compete sometimes probably against younger fencers where they base more on speed and timing, what made you successful that day? Because it was impressive.
Yeah, yeah. I think two things are really important when you do that style. One is the idea of distance. And when I say that, it doesn't just mean the traditional idea of the space between you and the other fencer. It's how you maintain distance and when you maintain distance. Because you're right, I'm 60, almost 65 now.
Dude,
Um,
bravo, man.
and
Bravo. That's awesome.
and there's no way I'm going to compete condition wise against some of those guys. But if you're smart about it, you understand when to break distance, when to relax, and then those periods of times when you do try and make an action or something, that's when you expend your energy. And that's the really important part of that because you run into this into a lot of sports where the younger people, they just want to go the whole time and they haven't figured that part out yet. And if you can use that against them, that works really well. So, distance and being able to manipulate that to relax and then use explosive attacks minimally is really important. I think the other part is, and this is one of the things that I really like about this technique, and we actually use this as a training tool in our club. I took it back to the club and said, let's use this
That's awesome.
because you really have to use a lot of what I call false attacks or feint attacks, right? To get in there, to draw actions, to get back out, to be able to assess what kind of strategy you're going to use, right? The big complaint about both modern fencing and historical fencing is you see two guys run at each other and they hit each other and that's it, right? This doesn't let you do that. So you really have to be intelligent about what attack you're going to make. So you really have to gain that information from your opponent. What attack
Man,
is going to work? And so the false attack is really an important part of the strategy in this as well.
that's awesome, man. Wow, that I might have to share that part audibly because or visually because that was amazing. And then because you've done so much, and this will be the last question because I know you have a hard stop coming up. What advice would you give a new fencer? It doesn't have to be in the way you guys train, but obviously you have a ton of experience. You're running a school. You have a good the people I've met from your school have always been just like nice people. That I think that, in my humble opinion, that rolls up to the top of the leader of that group. But
I would say the same thing about your group. So,
oh,
yeah.
thanks. But it's true. It's 100% true. And if you were talking to someone, say in New York or whatever, just wherever, and they said, "Hey, going to be getting into this now," what would be an advice you might give them as far as just like that? I've met people 20 years early, that I still remember what they told me, and I use it to this day. What might that be if it was just something simple?
That's an interesting question. First thing that comes to mind, and this may not be directly what you're looking for, but
Oh,
used to coach kids a lot when I was doing the Olympic style
yep.
fencing, when I had my own academy in Mississippi and stuff like that.
Cool.
And the key thing I always tried to get them to do was to enjoy themselves, to have a good time doing it. And that functions on a couple of different levels. One is you want to continue doing it because you're having a good time.
Mhm.
But also, when you're enjoying what you're doing, you become good at it, right? If you get overwhelmed with you're losing this bout. I'm not where I want to be yet. You're a fencer. You don't think I'm good enough. All those things destroy fencers. That's probably the one thing that destroys fencers, I think, the most is they think they should be better than they are, right? And they quit, right? Because
Yeah.
they don't understand that it's a process. Really having like a good time out there is really important. That goes along with sportsmanship and all that other stuff that really a part of, I think,
That
fencing a
right there,
year.
I watched you fence that day. You were super determined, super disciplined. But the thing, I remember turning to my friend and going, one of my fencers, like, this guy's having fun. Like,
Yeah,
you didn't rush the action, but you was exuberance in the fencing by just enjoying the moment, man.
yeah,
And that's great insight for sure. So, I'm call it there. I just wanted to catch up with you and do a little spotlight because that's like awesome insight. I might actually use some of this for video and then transcribe it too, because it's just
sure.
the energy you brings. It's awesome, man. Sure. So, and